The empty mansion. The Mensa mansion stood proudly in East Lagan, Accra. From a distance, it looked like a palace built to impress the world. A tall golden gate guarded the compound, opening into a driveway lined with palm trees that swayed whenever the coastal wind blew. Cars worth millions, Range Rovers, Benz, Lexus, rested in the garage like sleeping beasts. Inside, the marble floors were polished so well that they reflected faces like mirrors. The house was beautiful. Yes, the wealth was undeniable, but it was also empty. For 10 years, no child's laughter had ever echoed through its halls. No little feet had ever run across its polished tiles. The air was too quiet, too cold, and for Abba, the madam of the house, too painful. Abba was a beautiful woman in her mid-30s. She always wore expensive lace, her hair neatly styled, her nails polished. To the outside world, she was perfect. But inside her heart was a void that weighed heavier with each passing year. She wanted to hear a child call her Mame. She wanted to hold her own flesh and blood. She wanted to silence the whispers. Because the whispers never stopped. Whenever Abba visited family gatherings, she could hear them in the corners. Aunties shaking their heads, cousins whispering, "She has everything, but no child." Money can't buy children, you know. They look happy, but that house is too quiet. Those words sliced her heart open each time. Doctors had tried. Oh, how many hospital visits had they made? They did tests, prescribed pills, and gave injections. Abba drank bitter herbal mixtures too, the kind that stained her tongue black and made her stomach cramp. Prophets poured anointing oil on her head, prayed loudly, even declared, "This year you will carry your Samuel." Yet year after year, nothing. Her husband, Mr. Mensa, was always kind. "Abba, my love, don't cry," he would whisper in the night when she wept silently beside him. "You are enough for me." But Abba knew it wasn't enough. The pressure wasn't just from society, it was also from family. Mr. Waf, Mensa's relatives never missed a chance to remind her. His elder sister once said, "A rich man like my brother cannot be without a child. Abba, do something before another woman comes to take your place." Those words haunted her. One weekend, Abba traveled to her hometown in the eastern region. The visit was supposed to refresh her mind, but instead, she met a girl who planted a dangerous idea in her head. Her name was Afia. She was 19, slender but with the curves of a young woman in full bloom. Her skin was the rich, smooth black of cocoa butter, and her smile revealed white, innocent teeth. She was the daughter of one of Abba's distant relatives, a hardworking girl who fetched water, farmed, and cooked without complaint. Such a beautiful girl, Abba thought as she watched Afia pounding fufu with skill. Then suddenly, a thought flashed in her mind. Dangerous but tempting. What if I bring her to the city? She can help me in the house. She will be close to my husband. Maybe, just maybe, God will use her to give him what I cannot give. The thought scared Abba at first, but the more she considered it, the more it made sense to her. She smiled at Afia's parents that evening. "Your daughter is hardworking and respectful. Let me take her to Accra. She will work in my house, and I will pay her monthly. Don't worry, she will be well cared for." Afia's parents were delighted. It was an opportunity. "Hey, God bless you, madam." "Afia, did you hear? You are going to the city." Afia's eyes sparkled with excitement. She had always dreamed of seeing Accra, the city of lights, opportunities, and dreams. She hugged her parents and thanked Abba. That very night, Abba lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her mother's old house. She whispered to herself, "This is the only way. If he won't betray me willingly, maybe circumstances will push him. At least the family name will not die." The next day, Afia packed her small bag, 2 dresses, a pair of slippers, and a headscarf. She followed Abba into the big car that would carry her to a new life. As the car sped down the dusty village road towards the highway, Afia looked out the window, smiling with excitement. She thought she was only going to serve as a maid in a rich woman's home. But little did she know, she was stepping straight into a story of betrayal, lies, and revenge that would shape her life forever. The journey to Accra was long and tiring for Afia. She had never sat in an air-conditioned car before, and at first she shivered from the cold breeze inside. Abba noticed and smiled faintly. "Don't worry, you'll get used to it." As they entered the city, Afia's eyes widened. Skyscrapers, bright billboards, heavy traffic, and the endless honking of trotro horns filled her with awe. "Hey, Accra is beautiful," she whispered, pressing her face to the glass window. Abba chuckled, but said nothing. Her mind was elsewhere, on her plan. When they arrived at the Mensa mansion, Afia froze. The tall gates opened with a soft hum, and as the car rolled into the compound, she stared at the massive building before her. It was larger than anything she had ever seen. "Madam, this house is like a palace," she exclaimed. "Get used to it, Afia. This is your new home," Abba said. Inside, Afia met Mr. Mensa for the first time. He was tall, with a stern face that softened when he smiled. His suits were always crisp, his watch glistened, and his deep voice carried authority. "Welcome, young lady," he said, shaking her hand lightly. "Abba tells me you'll be helping around the house. Do your work well, and you will be fine." "Yes, sir," Afia replied, bowing her head respectfully. From that day, Afia became part of the household. Her duties were clear. Wake up early, sweep and mop, prepare breakfast, do laundry, and serve whenever needed. She worked with quiet obedience, never complaining. But life in the mansion was strange for her. She had come from a small mud house where everyone sat around a coal pot to eat. Now she lived in a place where meals were served on polished dining tables, where rooms had air conditioners, and where lights stayed on even during power cuts because of generators. At first, she felt out of place. She often hid in her room at night, whispering prayers to her mother's God to give her strength. But soon she found comfort. Abba treated her kindly, almost like a younger sister. "Afia, don't forget to add ginger when boiling Sir's tea. He likes it that way," Abba would say. "Yes, madam," Afia would reply with a smile. Mr. Mensa, too, was gentle with her. He respected her space and never acted inappropriately. In fact, he sometimes gave her advice. One morning, as he was leaving for work, he told her, "Afia, save the money Abba gives you. Life in Accra is not easy, but with savings, you can build something for yourself." Afia nodded. She admired him, not just because he was rich, but because he was kind. But Abba's eyes never stopped watching. Every time Afia served her husband, she observed closely. Will he notice her beauty? Will he be tempted? But Mr. Mensa remained loyal. He never looked at Afia twice. Years rolled by. Afia blossomed from a teenage girl into a young woman. Her body filled out, her curves became more pronounced, and her beauty drew stares whenever she stepped outside the gate. Even the security guards sometimes whispered about her. But Afia ignored all distractions. She remained loyal to the family. Yet, Abba grew restless. Her plan was failing. Time was running out. Each birthday that passed reminded her of her age. The whispers from family didn't stop either. One Sunday after church, Mr. Mensa's elder sister cornered Abba. "Abba, you are a good wife, but my brother needs an heir. Don't wait until another woman comes into his life by force." Abba forced a smile, but her heart was on fire. When she returned home, she sat alone in her bedroom, staring into the mirror. "No," she whispered, "no woman will take him from me. If it must happen, it will happen through Afia. And when the child comes, he will still be mine to raise." From that day, she began to plan more deliberately. She started sending Afia to serve Mr. Mensa more often. "Take this food to Sir's study," she would say. Or, "Afia, polish his shoes well. He has a big meeting tomorrow." Still, Mr. Mensa stayed faithful. He remained blind to Abba's intentions. The more he resisted temptation, the more frustrated Abba became. At night, she tossed and turned beside him, wondering why fate was cruel to her. Then came the rainy season. Meteorologists announced on the radio that heavy storms were expected across Accra. People rushed to clear gutters, prepare sandbags, and fix leaky roofs. That evening, Abba made a sudden decision. "My husband," she said sweetly at dinner, "my mother has not been well. I want to travel to the village tomorrow and spend some days with her." Mr. Mensa looked up, surprised. "So soon? The rains will be heavy? Can't you wait until the weather clears?" "No," Abba insisted, her voice firm. "She needs me now." Mr. Mensa sighed. "Very well, but be careful on the road." The next morning, Abba packed her bags and left for the village. But in her heart, she was not thinking about her mother. She was thinking about her husband and the maid she was leaving behind. The storm will keep them inside together. And when the night grows cold and lonely, who knows what may happen? As the car carrying her disappeared down the road, Afia stood by the gate waving goodbye. She had no idea her madam's departure was the beginning of her own entanglement in a web of betrayal. The rains began that very evening, just as Abba had predicted. By nightfall, the skies opened wide, and torrents of water poured down, flooding gutters, drumming against the roof, and sweeping litter across the streets of Accra. Inside the Mensa mansion, Afia moved quickly from room to room, closing windows and checking that no water seeped in. The sound of the rain was so loud, it felt as though the house itself was trembling. Afia, Mr. Mensa's voice called from the living room. She hurried down the stairs. Yes, sir. Did you check the guest rooms? The last time it rained like this, one of the windows leaked. Yes, sir. I'll check now. Afia grabbed a bucket and some rags and went about her duty. She worked tirelessly, though the storm outside unsettled her. She was still not used to Accra's violent rains. In her village, the storms were gentler, and families often gathered around a fire, singing while waiting for it to pass. But tonight, there was no singing, only silence, thunder, and the occasional flash of lightning illuminating the mansion's halls. After an hour, Afia returned to the living room. Mr. Mensa was seated in his armchair, sipping tea. The television was on, but the sound of the rain drowned out the news anchor's voice. Everything is fine now, sir, Afia said softly. Good, he replied. He looked up at her briefly, then back at his cup. Come, sit for a while. You must be tired. Afia hesitated. She never sat in the living room with her madam or sir. It felt like breaking a rule. Oh, no, sir, I am fine. I'll just go and rest in my room. But Mr. Mensa shook his head. Afia, don't be shy. You've worked hard today. Sit. Slowly, she lowered herself onto the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped together on her lap. She stared at the floor, afraid to meet his gaze. Minutes passed in silence except for the storm outside. Then Mr. Mensa spoke again. Afia, how long have you been with us now? Almost 4 years, sir. 4 years, he repeated thoughtfully. Time flies. She nodded. You've grown, he added, his voice gentle. When you came, you were just a girl. Now you're a young woman. Afia's cheeks flushed. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, unsure how to respond. Thank you, sir, he chuckled softly, noticing her discomfort. Don't be afraid. I only meant you've matured. You are hardworking, respectful, and trustworthy. Abba was right to bring you here. Afia's heart eased a little. She smiled faintly. I am grateful, sir. You and madam have treated me well. Another crack of thunder shook the house. The lights flickered, then went out completely. Darkness swallowed the mansion. Afia gasped. Oh, the light. It's okay, Mr. Mensa said calmly. The generator will come on soon. But it didn't. Minutes passed, and still the house remained dark. Only flashes of lightning through the curtains lit the room at intervals, briefly revealing Afia's anxious face and Mr. Mensa's calm expression. Afia, he said, his tone softer now, are you afraid of the dark? She shook her head quickly, though her body betrayed her as she hugged her knees closer. He smiled. You don't need to be. This house is safe. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the hammering of rain. Then Afia whispered, Sir, may I bring a candle? Yes, he said. She returned with 2 candles, placing one on the table and holding the other in her hand. The small glow illuminated her face, highlighting her delicate features, her smooth skin, her soft lips, her wide, innocent eyes. Mr. Mensa's gaze lingered longer than usual. Something stirred in his chest, something he had suppressed for years. He quickly looked away, ashamed of his own thoughts. Afia, too, felt something strange. Sitting across from him, the flickering light casting shadows on his strong face, she realized she admired him more than she had admitted to herself. He was not just her employer, he was kind, disciplined, and protective. But she shook the feeling away. This is Madam's husband. I cannot think such things. The rain intensified, pounding harder against the windows. Another loud crack of thunder made Afia jump. The candle in her hand wavered. Mr. Mensa stood and walked over. Careful, you'll burn yourself. Before she could protest, he took the candle from her hand and set it on the table. His fingers brushed against hers, warm, firm. Afia's heart skipped a beat. She looked up at him, and for the first time their eyes locked in the dim light. The air grew heavy. Both of them froze, caught in a moment that neither had expected nor prepared for. Then, as if waking from a dream, Mr. Mensa stepped back quickly. He cleared his throat. You should go and rest, Afia. It's late. Afia stood, her hands trembling slightly. Yes, sir. She hurried up the stairs, her heart pounding against her chest. Once inside her room, she shut the door and leaned against it, breathing heavily. What is happening to me? She whispered. Across the hall, Mr. Mensa sat back down, burying his face in his hands. His mind was in turmoil. What did I just feel? This is wrong. Abba is my wife. I cannot betray her. But deep down, he knew something had shifted. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm that had just begun inside the mansion. The next morning, the sky cleared, leaving behind damp roads and dripping leaves. Birds returned to their noisy chatter, as if mocking the violent storm of the night before. But inside the Mensa mansion, the air still carried an uneasy silence. Afia woke early, as she always did, sweeping the compound and preparing breakfast. But unlike other mornings, her hands were clumsy. She dropped the broom twice, burned the edge of the toast, and spilled tea on the kitchen counter. Her mind was elsewhere. The memory of the previous night replayed in her head: the darkness, the candlelight, the brush of Mr. Mensa's hand against hers, the look in his eyes. Every time she thought about it, her chest tightened, her stomach fluttered, and she felt both shame and longing. Why am I thinking like this? He is Madame's husband. God forgive me. When she served breakfast, she avoided his eyes. She placed the plates quietly, bowed slightly, and hurried out of the dining room. But as she left, she felt his gaze lingering on her back. Mr. Mensa himself was troubled. He sat at the table, barely touching his food. He, too, remembered last night. He had spent most of the night awake, battling his conscience. I must stay away from her. I must discipline myself. But when he saw Afia moving gracefully through the house, when he heard her soft voice answering politely, when he smelled the faint scent of soap on her skin, he felt his resolve weakening. That day, Abba was out again. She had an all-day seminar at the university. The mansion was unusually quiet, just Afia and Mr. Mensa. Around noon, Afia went to hang clothes in the backyard. The sun was hot, the ground damp from the rain, and the air smelled of wet earth. She hummed softly to herself as she worked, unaware that Mr. Mensa was watching from the balcony. He told himself to look away, but his eyes refused to obey. Her simple dress clung slightly to her as she reached up to hang a bedsheet. The sight stirred something deep in him, a desire he had suppressed for years. Afia turned suddenly and caught his gaze. For a moment, both froze. She lowered her eyes quickly, her face burning with embarrassment, and hurried inside. That evening, as Afia prepared dinner, she felt restless. Every sound seemed louder, every movement felt heavy, as though the air itself carried secrets. While chopping vegetables, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, and there was Mr. Mensa, standing in the doorway, his eyes fixed on her. "Sir," she whispered, unsure of what to say. He walked slowly into the kitchen. "Afia." His voice was low, almost husky. "You've been avoiding me." Her hands trembled. "No, sir. I've just been busy." "Busy?" He took another step closer. "Or afraid?" Afia's breath quickened. She backed away slightly, clutching the knife, then set it down quickly on the table as if it had suddenly grown too heavy. "Sir, please, don't say that." Mr. Mensa stopped just a step away from her. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with an intensity she had never seen before. "Afia," he said softly, "I don't know what's happening to me, but ever since last night, I can't stop thinking about you." Her heart pounded wildly. She shook her head, tears already forming in her eyes. "Sir, please don't. Madam trusts me. You are like a father to me. Please." He reached out slowly, almost hesitantly, as if battling with himself. His hand hovered in the air, then dropped to his side. He turned away abruptly, running a hand over his face. "No, this is wrong. You're right. Forgive me, Afia. I shouldn't have said that." She stood frozen, her chest heaving, tears now streaming down her cheeks. She wanted to run, to lock herself in her room, but her feet would not move. Finally, she whispered, "Sir, please let's forget this ever happened. Please." Mr. Mensa nodded slowly, his shoulders heavy with guilt. "Yes, we must forget, for Abba's sake, for yours." He walked out of the kitchen, leaving Afia trembling, her hands pressed against her chest as though trying to calm the storm inside her. That night, Afia could not sleep. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind a battlefield. "He said he cannot stop thinking about me, but it is wrong, so wrong. But why does my heart beat so fast when I see him? Why do I dream of him when I close my eyes?" She turned restlessly from side to side, but sleep refused to come. In the master bedroom, Mr. Mensa too lay awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the same forbidden thoughts. The mansion was quiet, but inside its walls, two hearts burned with desires they dared not name, and both knew it was only a matter of time before the line they were trying so hard not to cross would vanish completely. The following week passed in a haze of tension. The Mensa mansion was no longer the calm, respectable household it had always been. Beneath the surface of polished floors and well-prepared meals, emotions ran wild. Afia tried her best to keep things normal. She cleaned, cooked, and obeyed every instruction without complaint, but her spirit was unsettled. Every time she passed by Mr. Mensa, she felt her breath catch. Every time she served him tea or dinner, her hand trembled. She prayed constantly, asking God to remove the strange fire that had entered her heart. But the fire only grew. Mr. Mensa was no better. His once calm demeanor at home had changed. He spoke less, smiled rarely, and often sat alone in deep thought. He was a man torn between two worlds, loyalty to his wife and a growing, unstoppable attraction to the young maid who brightened his home. One Thursday evening, the household felt different. Abba had announced in the morning that she would be late again. Another meeting at the university followed by dinner with colleagues. Afia felt her heart sink when she heard it. A part of her longed for Abba to stay, to serve as a barrier between her and temptation. But another part, deep, hidden, longed for what solitude might bring. By evening, the house was quiet. The sky outside was bruised with orange and purple as the sun dipped below the horizon. Afia moved about the kitchen, cooking light soup for dinner. The rich aroma of tomatoes, garlic, and pepper filled the air. She hummed softly, trying to distract herself. Then she heard footsteps. She froze. She didn't have to turn to know who it was. Afia, Mr. Mensa said, his voice calm but carrying a weight she couldn't ignore. She turned slowly. He stood at the doorway, leaning slightly against the frame, his eyes fixed on her. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his tie loosened, giving him a relaxed but commanding presence. "Sir," she said quietly, her hands fidgeting with the wooden spoon she held, "dinner will soon be ready." "I'm not hungry," he replied, stepping into the kitchen. Afia's chest tightened. "But Madam said—" "I said I'm not hungry." His voice was firmer now, though his eyes betrayed turmoil. He stepped closer, the space between them shrinking. "Afia," he whispered, "I tried to fight this. I swear I tried. But every day I see you, and I can't." His voice broke slightly. "I can't hold it back anymore." Tears welled in Afia's eyes. She shook her head, backing up until her back pressed against the wall. "Sir, please, don't say that. Don't do this. Madam trusts us both. Please, for her sake." He closed the last step between them. His hand lifted, trembling, as he cupped her cheek. Afia flinched, but she didn't pull away. "Tell me you don't feel it too," he whispered, his face inches from hers. Her lips trembled. She wanted to deny it, to scream no. But the truth burned too strongly in her chest. Her silence was an answer he could read clearly. Mr. Mensa's breath came heavier now. He leaned closer, and for a moment the world outside disappeared. The ticking of the kitchen clock, the soft bubbling of the soup, the hum of insects beyond the window. All that existed was the forbidden pull between them. "Sir, please," she whispered, but her voice was weak, betraying her. His lips brushed hers. Just a whisper of a touch, but it was enough to ignite the storm they had both been holding back. Afia's knees weakened, her hands pressed against his chest, not to push him away, but as if to steady herself. The kiss deepened. It was desperate, hungry, carrying weeks of suppressed desire. Afia's mind screamed against it, but her body betrayed her. She kissed him back, tears sliding down her cheeks. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Afia's face was wet with tears, her lips trembling. "This is wrong," she whispered. "God will punish us. Madam, if she ever finds out—" Mr. Mensa gripped her hands tightly, his own eyes full of guilt and desire. I know it's wrong, but Afia, I can't let you go." She shook her head, pulling her hands free. "Please, don't say that. We must stop now, before it's too late." He stepped back slowly, his chest rising and falling heavily. For a long moment, neither spoke. The soup bubbled softly in the background, as if mocking the silence between them. Finally, Afia whispered, "Sir, I beg you, let's forget this happened." But even as she said it, she knew forgetting was impossible. The line had been crossed. That night, she lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her lips still tingled from the kiss. Her heart ached with guilt, but another part of her, dark, shameful, and undeniable, longed for more. In the master bedroom, Mr. Mensa sat at the edge of his bed, his head buried in his hands. He had betrayed his wife, even if only with a kiss. His heart was heavy with guilt, but when he closed his eyes, all he saw was Afia's face. The breaking point had come. Nothing would ever be the same again. The days following that night were filled with quiet tension. Inside the Mensa mansion, the air seemed heavier, thicker. Afia moved around the house like a shadow, careful not to meet Mr. Mensa's gaze directly, though their stolen glances and brief touches said more than words ever could. The household staff began noticing the change. Even the security guards whispered among themselves, commenting on the unusual closeness between Sir and the maid. "Hey, have you noticed?" One guard said to another. "Sir no day look Abba like this, but the young girl, the way Ide happened." Afia ignored the rumors, though they gnawed at her pride. Her heart was now a battlefield between desire, guilt, and fear. She knew she was walking a dangerous path. Abba, meanwhile, remained unaware. Her trips to the village became more frequent, under the guise of visiting her mother, but she never suspected that her careful plan had already begun to unfold without her knowledge. Weeks passed. The stolen kisses, the whispered conversations, and the secret meetings became more frequent. Mr. Mensa and Afia were careful, never in public, always when Abba was away, but the electricity between them was undeniable. Then, one rainy evening, much like the stormy night that had started it all, Afia discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified, unsure how it would be received. The house, already tense, now held an invisible weight of secrecy and fear. She hesitated for hours before telling Mr. Mensa. She found him in his study, working late. He looked up as she entered, his tired eyes lighting up at her presence. "Sir, I have to tell you something," she said softly, her hands shaking. "What is it, Afia?" he asked, concerned. I'm pregnant," she whispered. The words trembled in the air. For a moment, silence hung between them. Mr. Mensa felt the world tilt beneath his feet. He ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. Anger, fear, responsibility, guilt, they all collided inside him. We have to think carefully," he said finally, his voice heavy. "Abba, if she finds out," Afia nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I know, sir. I didn't plan this. It just happened." Mr. Mensa leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He knew he could not abandon her. But what could he do? Abba had been his wife for years. The law, tradition, and his conscience demanded he consider her feelings too. After long nights of discussion, sleepless hours, and endless debates with himself, he made a decision that would change all their lives. He would marry Afia as a second wife. When Abba returned from her village, she noticed the change immediately. Afia moved with confidence now, a subtle sway in her walk that had not been there before. She noticed the way Mr. Mensa looked at her, more than he ever had before. It did not take long for the truth to come out. Afia, proud yet terrified, revealed her pregnancy to Abba. Abba's reaction was explosive. Her face turned red with fury. She screamed, shouted, and accused Afia of seducing her husband. But Afia, standing tall despite her fear, declared, "Madam, I did not plan this. It happened, and now Sir has accepted responsibility." The household was thrown into chaos. Servants whispered behind closed doors, neighbors gossiped, and Abba's family was contacted in anger. Mr. Mensa, caught in the storm, tried to mediate, but Abba was relentless. "Throw her out," Abba demanded at one point, her voice shaking with rage. "I cannot stay in the same house as a woman who took my husband." But Mr. Mensa refused. "She is carrying my child. I will not abandon her. Abba, please try to understand." Abba, furious and heartbroken, decided to take matters into her own hands. She plotted against Afia, determined to regain her control over the household. But Afia, now more confident and aware of her power, had allies among the staff and even within Mr. Mensa's circle of friends. The mansion became a battlefield of emotions: anger, lust, betrayal, and power struggles. Afia's pregnancy advanced, her belly growing round as whispers spread. Abba's jealousy intensified, and the tension in the house reached a breaking point. It was during these tense months that another unexpected event occurred. Abba discovered she was also pregnant. The news shocked everyone. How could it be? The months had been tense, stressful, and yet, against all odds, life had given her a child as well. The two women's pregnancies overlapped by 7 months, creating a strange, cruel symmetry in the household. Each felt the other's presence constantly, whether in the kitchen, the hallways, or even at night. Afia's growing belly was a constant reminder of Mr. Mensa's indiscretion, while Abba's unborn child reminded everyone that she was still the legal wife. As the months went by, the tension escalated. Afia, proud and quiet, moved with dignity, refusing to be cowed. Abba, humiliated and furious, plotted constantly, trying to reclaim her position in the household. By the time both women delivered, the Mensa mansion was a war zone, and everyone who lived there knew that nothing would ever be the same. From this chaos, a child named Bernald was born to Afia, a boy destined to grow up with a fire in his heart and a thirst for revenge against the people who had wronged his mother. Abba's child arrived 7 months later, a girl, innocent and unaware of the bitterness that surrounded her from birth. The stage was set. The lives of Afia, Abba, Mr. Mensa, and the children were now intertwined in ways none of them could escape. Bernald grew up in a house full of tension, secrets, and whispered grudges. From the day he opened his eyes, he carried the weight of betrayal and injustice, though he did not understand it yet. Afia doted on him, protecting him from Abba's silent scorn, and from the judgment of neighbors who whispered behind their gates. The young boy was handsome even as a child, with his mother's smooth skin, bright eyes, and a proud, defiant chin. Afia always told him stories of strength and resilience, of how life could be cruel, but that a smart person could turn pain into power. "Bernald," she said one evening, tucking him into bed, "remember this. Never let anyone make you feel small. Never forget where you come from, and never let anyone take what is yours." He nodded solemnly, not fully understanding, but the words sank deep into his heart. He grew into a confident, charming teenager, tall and strong, with the kind of looks that drew attention wherever he went. Girls in school admired him, neighbors whispered about him, and even men envied him. But he remained obedient to his mother, listening carefully to her warnings and her stories of the past. Meanwhile, Abba's daughter, beautiful but sheltered, grew up in the same city, oblivious to the undercurrents that shaped her half-brother's life. Bernald, however, never forgot the injustice done to his mother. He remembered the way Afia had been mocked, the way Abba had tried to humiliate her, and the way Mr. Mensa, his father, had failed to protect her at first. By the time Bernald was 18, he had crafted a plan. He would enter the Mensa household, not as the child of Afia, but as a man who could command attention, charm the women, and make the men fear the consequences of their mistakes. His first step was to study hard, grow strong, and train himself in manners, language, and charm. Afia encouraged him. "Bernald," she said, "you will be ready when the time comes. Your father and Abba will never see you coming." Bernald obeyed, focusing on his looks, his intelligence, and his confidence. He learned the art of seduction not for frivolity, but as a tool for justice. He had seen too many people suffer in silence. He would make sure no one escaped the consequences of their actions. Then the day came. Bernald, now 22, walked into the city streets looking every bit the man Afia had groomed him to be. Women could not resist his smile, his sharp suits, his confidence, and even his casual charm. But his eyes were always calculating, always watching, always waiting. The Mensa mansion remained as grand as ever. Mr. Mensa had aged, his once proud and composed face now marked with lines of guilt and regret. Afia, now a full-fledged wife, had grown confident and strong, yet her heart still feared what Bernald might do one day. Bernald did not wait long. He began frequenting the markets, coffee shops, and social gatherings near the mansion. Slowly, subtly, he made himself known to Afia, introducing himself as a charming young man from the neighborhood. Afia, unaware of who he truly was at first, felt an odd sense of familiarity that she could not place. He worked his way into her life, gradually gaining her trust. Then, one afternoon, as the sun glared harshly over Accra, he leaned closer than necessary during a conversation. Afia felt her pulse quicken, her hands tremble, though she knew she should resist. Bernald, always confident, allowed himself a mischievous smile. "You don't remember me, do you?" he whispered softly, letting his words float like a temptation in the air. Afia's eyes widened, and her heart skipped. Something in him seemed familiar, though she could not immediately place it. He laughed softly, charming and irresistible. "Perhaps we are meant to meet again." Over the next few weeks, Bernald's presence in Afia's life became constant. The stolen glances, casual touches, and his careful attention created tension in the mansion. Afia found herself drawn to him despite her better judgment. The chemistry was undeniable. And then came the moment that would seal the first stage of his revenge. Bernald invited Afia to a private meeting in the garden under the guise of discussing household business. The moon shone brightly, reflecting off the wet leaves after a brief evening rain. Afia arrived, her heart beating fast. Bernald stepped closer, his eyes holding a fire she could not resist. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned in and kissed her. The kiss was long, deliberate, and full of purpose. Afia tried to resist, but the combination of his charm, confidence, and her own past longing made it impossible. Meanwhile, unseen from a distance, Mr. Mensah looked out from his balcony. His eyes widened in horror as he realized what was happening before him. Afia, his wife, was in the arms of a man he did not recognize. Yet the unease in his chest told him something was wrong. Bernald pulled back slowly, letting the tension linger. "Do you know who I am?" he whispered, a sly smile on his face. Afia shook her head, breathless. "No." "Look closely," he said softly, letting the truth hang in the air. And then, like a bolt of lightning, the realization hit. Her eyes widened in shock. The man she had been drawn to, the one who had seduced her, was Bernald, her son. The son she had raised in secret, the son of the woman who had been wronged by Abba and Mr. Mensah years ago. The game had begun. The next evening, the Mensah mansion was unusually quiet. The servants whispered nervously, sensing the tension but not knowing its source. Afia moved gracefully through the house, pretending to go about her duties, though her mind was racing with the revelation of Bernald's identity. She could hardly believe it. Her own son, now a man, had returned with fire in his eyes and a plan she could only guess at. Bernald, meanwhile, prepared meticulously for the night. He had watched his father for years, studied his habits, and waited patiently for the right moment. Now, it was time to execute the plan he had nurtured in his heart for over 2 decades. Afia's room was dimly lit. She sat at the dressing table, brushing her hair, thinking about what had just happened. Every moment of temptation and desire that had once seemed like guilt now felt charged with purpose. Her son's presence made her feel alive, yet afraid. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Mother?" Bernald's voice called. "Bernald?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Come with me," he whispered, a mischievous smile on his face. They moved through the house silently. The lights flickered occasionally, casting shadows across the polished floors. Afia's heart pounded, and she couldn't ignore the thrill of danger, even as fear gripped her chest. Finally, they reached the veranda overlooking the garden. Bernald turned to her, holding her hand gently. "Mother, it's time," he said. "Time for what?" she asked, unsure whether to be afraid or trust him. "Time for justice," he replied. His eyes were intense, determined. Father and Abba must see the consequences of their actions. Afia nodded slowly. She knew what he meant. This was the moment she had always feared and prayed for, the moment where the power shifted. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Mr. Mensah was in his study, unaware that the storm of revenge had already begun. He had just returned from checking on the generator when he noticed a figure moving past the balcony. He squinted into the moonlight and froze. Bernald, tall, handsome, and confident, stood with Afia in the garden. He whispered softly to her, guiding her movements, preparing the stage for what would unfold. Afia's pulse raced. She had never felt so alive, yet so terrified. Suddenly, the front door opened, and Abba returned unexpectedly. She was soaked from the sudden rain, her hair plastered to her forehead, her expensive clothes clinging to her body. She had not anticipated what she would find. As she stepped into the garden, her eyes fell on Afia and Bernald together. Her face twisted in shock, anger, and disbelief. What is going on here?" she screamed, her voice echoing across the mansion. Bernald turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers. A calm, confident smile spread across his face. "Do you see now, Madam Abba? Do you see what your cruelty has caused?" Abba froze, realizing with horror that the man before her, the one who had seduced Afia, was not just anyone. He was the son of the woman she had tried to humiliate, the boy she had mocked and ignored. Mr. Mensah rushed out at that moment, drawn by the shouting. His heart sank as he saw the scene before him. Afia, his second wife, was standing close to a man whose resemblance to him struck like lightning. And then the truth hit him with terrifying clarity. "Bernald," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Yes, father," Bernald replied calmly. "I am your son, the son of Afia. And this is the beginning of justice." The storm outside intensified, rain hammering the roof and windows, thunder shaking the mansion as if nature itself approved of the reckoning. Abba screamed, her voice breaking. You? This is impossible. This boy, this man, he's too old. How?" Bernald raised a hand, silencing her. You humiliated my mother, threw her out to the streets, and thought you could live without consequences. Tonight, you will see that your actions have meaning and that justice never sleeps. In a shocking move, Bernald stepped closer to Afia, taking her hand publicly. Abba's face turned red with rage, while Mr. Mensah's heart ached with guilt and shame. The servants watched silently, too terrified to move, as the father of the household realized that he had been blind for years. The man who had built wealth and prestige could not escape the consequences of neglecting his responsibilities. Afia looked at her son, pride shining in her eyes. Go on, Bernald. Show them. And Bernald, confident and unapologetic, leaned closer to Afia as if sealing a pact in front of the entire household. Mr. Mensah felt the weight of every betrayal, every lie, every humiliation. He knew that the path to redemption would be long and painful. The storm raged outside, but inside the mansion, a greater storm had begun. One of shame, revenge, and the undeniable truth that past actions could never be hidden forever. From that night on, nothing would ever be the same for the Mensah family. Bernald had planted the seeds of revenge, and the harvest was only beginning. The morning after the garden confrontation, the Mensah mansion was shrouded in tension. The servants whispered among themselves, glancing nervously at Afia, who had grown pale and silent. Bernald, however, carried himself with the confidence of a man who had already won a victory. Afia, once proud and sure of her place, now felt the weight of her son's plan pressing heavily on her heart. She had never imagined that her own child would orchestrate such a public confrontation, using her as a tool in the pursuit of revenge. And yet, she understood why he did it. Every humiliation, every insult, every moment she had endured in silence was being repaid, not recklessly, but meticulously. Mr. Mensah remained in shock. He had watched helplessly as the scene unfolded the night before. He could not believe how blind he had been, how easily he had let his household fall into chaos. His heart ached with guilt, knowing that Afia's suffering had been compounded by his indecision and Abba's cruelty. Bernald, now fully in control of the situation, spoke firmly to both his father and Afia. This ends today. The house, the family, everything. It starts fresh now. Afia, you have lived long enough in comfort without facing the truth. It's time to step outside and see the world as it is. Afia's eyes widened. Bernald, please don't do this. I cannot. You can, he interrupted gently but firmly. It's time for you to understand what life outside these walls feels like, to experience what I felt growing up. You must go. Afia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. But the house, the people, the life we built. Bernald placed a hand on her shoulder. None of that belongs to you anymore. The power has shifted. The wrongs have to be set right. Afia realized there was no arguing. Bernald had become a force beyond her control, and his vision of justice left no room for mercy. She packed her few belongings in silence, her pride crumbling with each passing moment. By noon, she was escorted out of the mansion. The rain that had fallen the night before had left streets slick and muddy, and now she stepped into the world she had long sheltered her son from. Every neighbor, every passerby stared in disbelief as the woman who had once been the elegant, proud wife of Mr. Mensah now walked the streets with nothing but her belongings and a heart full of sorrow. Inside the mansion, Bernald returned to confront his father directly. Father, he said calmly, you see what happens when you fail to protect those who love you? You see the consequences of ignoring the truth? Mr. Mensah's shoulders sagged. Bernald, I am sorry. I never wanted any of this to happen. Bernald shook his head. Sorry isn't enough. Afia suffered for years because of your indecision and Abba's cruelty. Now you will witness the outcome. Justice has its way. In the following weeks, Bernald solidified his control over the household. Afia's departure left Abba exposed. Bernald, aware of her schemes and pride, decided to use the same tactics his mother had endured years ago. He began spending time in the mansion openly, asserting his presence. His charm and calculated moves drew Afia's attention from the outside, but more importantly, it made Abba increasingly aware of her vulnerability. Bernald's intent was clear. Abba would feel the same helplessness his mother had felt, and she would witness the consequences of her cruelty firsthand. Then, one evening, Bernald executed the final stage of his plan. He seduced Abba, knowing she could not resist the combination of his charm, his resemblance to her husband, and his intelligence. She fell into his trap, thinking she could enjoy fleeting pleasure without consequence. But Bernald ensured the doors were open, lights bright, and his father watching from a distance. Mr. Mensa, witnessing his wife in the arms of a young man he did not recognize at first, felt shock and devastation unlike anything he had ever imagined. Bernald pulled away from Abba slowly, letting the realization hit. "Do you see now?" He whispered softly, his voice carrying the weight of years of planning and resentment. "This is justice. This is what happens when you betray others." Abba's face turned red with shame, fury, and disbelief. She could not speak. She could only stare at Bernald, the young man who had grown from the child she had mocked into a man she could no longer control. Mr. Mensa, overwhelmed with guilt, stepped forward. "Bernald, what have you done?" Bernald turned to his father with calm eyes. "I've ensured that justice is served, Afia has been protected, and those who caused her pain will see their consequences." Afia, watching from a distance, felt a mix of awe and fear. Her son had become a force beyond comprehension, executing plans she could barely imagine. She understood then that Bernald's rise to power and the fall of those who had wronged them was complete. The storm had passed outside, but inside the Mensa mansion, a new order had been established, one that would leave no one untouched by the flames of revenge and justice. The days following Abba's public humiliation were tense and silent. The Mensa mansion, once a place of luxury and quiet order, now echoed with the weight of broken pride, regret, and the subtle stirrings of change. Bernald had proven his power, and his father and Abba had both been forced to confront the consequences of years of selfishness and betrayal. Afia, though proud of her son, felt a heavy sadness in her heart. She had not wished for anyone to suffer, not even Abba, but she understood that justice had its own course. She watched Bernald closely, realizing that the young man she had raised with love, discipline, and caution had become a force that could no longer be contained. Mr. Mensa, meanwhile, wandered through the mansion with heavy steps. He avoided the eyes of the servants, and his nights were filled with restless thoughts. He had lost years to pride and indecision, allowing jealousy and misunderstanding to shape his household. Now, facing Bernald's calculated retribution, he knew that he had only one chance to repair the damage. "Bernald," he called one evening as they sat together in the grand living room, the air thick with silence. I see now the pain I caused you and your mother. I failed both of you. I cannot change the past, but please tell me, is there a way to make amends?" Bernald studied his father for a long moment. The young man's eyes, once burning with vengeance, softened slightly. "Father," he said slowly, "amends can only come when truth is recognized and humility is embraced. You must understand the pain you caused and accept the consequences of your actions." Mr. Mensa nodded, his shoulders heavy with guilt. "I understand. I will do whatever it takes to right the wrongs." Afia, standing quietly in the background, stepped forward. Her voice was calm, yet firm. "Bernald, your father is ready to face his mistakes. It's time to consider what comes next for all of us. This household cannot continue in fear and resentment." Bernald nodded slowly, then turned his eyes toward Abba, who had been silent and broken since the events of the past week. The once proud woman now stood before them, her dignity shattered, forced to confront the consequences of her cruelty. "Abba," Bernald said, his tone measured, "you treated my mother with disdain, drove her from the house, and thought your actions would have no consequence. Now you have faced justice. Do you understand the pain you caused?" Abba lowered her eyes, tears flowing freely. "Yes, Bernald, I see now. I was cruel, jealous, and unfair. I'm sorry." Bernald studied her for a long moment. "Apologies are a start, but actions must follow. You must learn to live with the consequences and respect those you wronged. Only then can this household have peace." Mr. Mensa stepped closer to Afia. I beg your forgiveness," he said, his voice trembling. "I failed to protect you, and I failed as a husband and father. Please, allow me a chance to make things right." Afia looked at him, her heart heavy. She had suffered, but she also saw the genuine remorse in his eyes. After a long pause, she nodded slowly. Mr. Mensa, I will give you that chance, but it will take time to rebuild trust and respect." Over the next few months, the Mensa household began a slow process of healing. Bernald remained a dominant presence, ensuring that no injustice went unchecked, but he also guided both Afia and Mr. Mensa toward reconciliation. Abba, humbled and remorseful, learned to live with her mistakes and slowly earned back some respect, though she could never forget the lessons Bernald had taught her. Afia, proud of her son's courage and intelligence, finally felt a sense of peace. The boy she had raised to seek justice had not become a monster, but a man who understood the balance of power, respect, and morality. One bright morning, Bernald stood with his mother in the garden. The sun reflected off the dew on the grass, and birds sang as if celebrating a new beginning. He smiled at her, a smile full of warmth, pride, and love. "Mother," he said, "we did it. We've survived. We've righted the wrongs. And now it's time to live our lives without fear." Afia hugged him tightly. "Yes, Bernald, we've endured and we will endure again, but this time with love and justice guiding us." Mr. Mensah, watching from the veranda, felt a sense of relief and gratitude. He had witnessed the power of resilience, the consequences of neglect, and the redemption that only honesty and courage could bring. In the end, the Mensah household found a fragile peace. The scars of betrayal remained, but they were tempered by growth, understanding, and the knowledge that no wrong could remain hidden forever. Bernald had fulfilled his purpose. Afia had regained her dignity. And even Mr. Mensah had learned that true respect and love required vigilance, humility, and the courage to face one's mistakes. As the sun set over the city, the mansion no longer echoed with tension or fear. It was a place of reconciliation, justice, and new beginnings, a reminder that even in the darkest storms, redemption and reunion were possible. And so, the story of Afia, Bernald, Mr. Mensah, and Abba came full circle, leaving a legacy of resilience, courage, and the undeniable power of truth.